Welcome, one and all, to all of those who love to rock. You have come to the right place because the podcast will rock. That's right. It is the new podcast. We are here to discuss, dissect, and just overall enjoy the musical discography of Van Halen. I am one of your fearless leaders in this journey. My name is Mark Kamier, and joining me is the ever popular, ever knowledgeable Corey Morissette. How you doing, sir?
I am doing fantastic. I've been waiting to do this show for a long time, honoring the mighty Van Halen and one of the best catalogs in rock and roll history. I'm just itching to get to it. So I'm really glad that we're here today, finally kicking off this podcast.
You know, this is not the first time Corey and I have been broadcasting partners. This is sort of a reunion of sorts. But I'm excited to do this. I love that you pitched this idea to me and had me in mind for it. I have loved, quick thing about me, about this band in particular. I've been a fan ever since I was a small child, a wee lad. Eddie Van Halen is the entire reason why I picked up the guitar. When did you first come into the world of Van Halen, Corey?
Well, I'm considerably older than yourself, Mark. So
that's fair.
When I was 10 years old, the year was 1984, and a pretty big album dropped in 1984 called 1984. And I remember watching, I'm in Canada, so we didn't have MTV. We had Much Music, and the video for Jump came on, and you see Diamond Dave, hair a-flowing and with the high kicks, and a very, very drunk and or stoned Eddie Van Halen noodling away on the guitar. And I was just mesmerized. I thought these guys are amazing, and immediately went back, caught up in all the Diamond Dave era. And then, of course, shortly thereafter, Dave left, started his solo career, and Sammy Hagar came in, and I was in love with that era as well. So I'm kind of a fan from all the way back to 1984.
The Ice Cream Man had so many flavors that he just had to try. But basically, just to give you a small rundown of how this show is going to work, typically, what we want to do is go over each song, as I mentioned at the top, each song from the catalog of Van Halen. And I know what you're thinking. Wow, that's going to take you forever. Well, not forever, but it's going to take us a good while. So needless to say, you won't be short of content. So if you like what you hear, if you really enjoy the show, please make sure you let us know, share it, and we'll get into all the information here at the end. But like I said, the way this is going to work is Corey was nice enough to fashion a giant wheel filled with all of the tracks by Van Halen. And I took a look at this wheel before we started recording, and my only response was wow, because it's just insane when you look at their catalog from that perspective. So that's what we're gonna do. Each episode, it's gonna be a spin of the wheel. It's gonna be kind of like a rando, and we're gonna go into the songs. But today is a little bit different. Today we know exactly which one we're gonna start with. We have to start with basically the song that everyone started with. Corey, you can certainly attest to this. This is the song that was the introduction. If you knew nothing about the band before, nothing at all, you just saw the record and you decided, I'll buy that, because kids, that's what we used to do. If the cover looked cool, we bought it. And you put it on, put the needle down, and you heard the first track. That was your introduction to this band. We're talking, of course, about Running with the Devil. Corey, was that your full introduction to Van Halen, just listening to the album at the drop of the needle, or were you made aware of them beforehand?
This album, no. Like I said, I kind of came in 1984, and after I got that album and wore it out, I kind of went back and got the back catalog and started with Van Halen 1. And I'm really glad you brought up record stores, because back in the day, that's what you would do. You would walk into the record store and you saw this really cool kind of silver blue logo with a V and an H on it. And then, you had Eddie Van Halen in the top left corner, David Lee Roth looking super cool in the top right, Alex pounding away on the drums in the bottom left, and then Mike Anthony wailing away on the bass in the bottom right. And you think, wow, these guys look really cool. Like this is an album you would buy sight unseen just based on the cover art. And then, like you said, you pop on side one, you put the needle down and the car horns kick in, and it takes you somewhere. And this album is wildly considered one of the greatest debut albums of all time. I know Guns N' Roses kind of maybe supplanted it with Appetite for Destruction back in the 80s, but Van Halen 1, an all-time classic, and it just seemed right. I should mention right off the hop, the whole randomized song by something isn't a format that we're revolutionizing here on And the Podcast Will Rock. I got to give a shout out to the guys on Pod of Thunder, which is the gold standard for rock and roll podcasting. They are phenomenal. They broke down the entire Kiss catalog track by track.
Insane. That's insane to me.
It's hundreds and hundreds of songs. Like when I did the wheel, we're looking at 120 tracks or 120 episodes for Van Halen. Kiss, they were into the 300s, like because they did all the tracks from the solo albums, the 4 solo albums that came out. Plus, they did all the studio tracks. We're kind of just riffing off their format. So there's going to be no live tracks. No remixes or anything like that. We might reference them if they come up. This is just studio tracks from all the studio albums. I don't think we might get in the mood and break down a couple of Dave solo tracks. Who knows? Sammy's playing with Mike Anthony right now. Maybe we'll do a song from there. Even Wolfgang Van Halen has a great debut album out under the banner of Mammoth WVH.
He really does. Yeah.
It's a great album. Oh, it's amazing. I love that record so much. So, we're going to head down this road. There's no hard and fast rules. We're just going to let you know if we like it or not. We got some Diamond Dave isms, the patented Diamond Dave-o-meter, and he'll let you know if it's good or bad. Ooh, yeah, Diamond Dave. So look forward to that. But I love the random idea, and that came from the Pod of Thunder guys. But this first song, it really had to be Running with the Devil, which was the second single actually from their debut album back in 1978. It was actually also named in 2009 the 9th greatest hard rock song of all time by VH1. So there's a huge pedigree on this one.
It was certainly not the first song I heard by Van Halen, but again, I'm considerably younger from when they debuted this album, but I do remember that song being very prominent. You couldn't go a day listening to rock radio stations without at least hearing it once a day. It wasn't, and I honestly cannot remember what the first Van Halen song I heard. I don't want to assume it was Jump, but it probably was Jump. Nevertheless, Running with the Devil was right behind them. So it was kind of when I'm a kid checking out this album, it was a shock to me that, oh, okay, so the singles that they put out aren't the ones that start the album. What a concept. It's like, but I do know this song. And it's haunting. It's a haunting opening. It's just a haunting track in general. And it's a statement, I think.
Oh, it absolutely is. And, for the longest time, before I really got into Van Halen 1, I always thought the album kicked off with Eruption and then into You Really Got Me, which was their first single. And until I actually got the album on vinyl, because, of course, in the digital age, you download Van Halen and you put it on shuffle, and, running order doesn't matter so much. But back in the 70s, when all you had was vinyl, running order was everything, and how you selected the songs. So Running with the Devil, a great album opener from this album. You Really Got Me was the first single, of course, a cover of the Kinks song, and then Ain't Talking About Love came after. But in an album full of classics, like you said, this one here you hear all the time on classic rock radio to this day. Absolutely. And even if all you got was Best of Volume 1 or Best of Both Worlds or any number of their greatest hits, Running with the Devil, it was featured very prominently. Actually, interesting fact, Mark, on Best of Volume 1, which is their first greatest hits, it was an alternate edit of Running with the Devil where the verse, the choruses, and the solos were arranged in a different order than it was on the vinyl version. Apparently this was a mistake, and they actually had to fix that in subsequent pressings, but there's still some versions of Best of Volume 1 out there on CD with a different mix of Running with the Devil.
Well, as someone who owned that Best of Volume 1 album, I can tell you I got one of the corrected prints because it did not sway from its original recording. But I do I'm glad you brought up that Volume 1 Best of, because that starts off with Eruption instead of Running with the Devil, which you would think it's like, well, it's the best of, and since Running with the Devil was their opening track for the first album, let's start with it. No, they start with Eruption, and to be honest with you, I kind of feel like they should have done that. They should have opened this particular album with Eruption, but I understand why they didn't. But yeah, I never really thought about it until the Best of Volume 1 came out, and I bought it, and it opens with Eruption, and I was like, yep, this should have been the opener, but I digress.
So that's probably what confused me, because I also had Best of Volume 1 and it opened with Eruption. And I thought, well, that's just how, that's such a great way to open an album. That's how Van Halen 1 probably opened. But no, it was actually Running with the Devil that kicked things off. Mm-hmm. And you know, we should talk maybe about the success of the song a little bit here. In the US Billboard Hot 100, it got all the way to 84. So, you know, it was a top 100 hit, but not a colossal hit. Remember, Van Halen, back in the late 70s, kind of made their name as a party band in California. They played a lot of dances and all that, and just played wherever anybody would hire them to play. And that's kind of how they built their following. And I know Warner Brothers was very excited when they signed them to a really awful record deal. I'm actually reading a book from their former manager from the Dave era, and it's really, really enlightening. But, you know, these kids were just flat broke, just playing wherever they could play. Had these songs. They did a 4-song demo with Gene Simmons. And this was actually one of the songs that was on that demo. Even the car horns, I guess, were actually on that Gene Simmons demo, because he wanted to manage them until Paul kind of slapped him upside the head and said, no, focus on Kiss. Don't go fooling around with Van Halen. So this is the sound of a hungry young band, I think, in 1978. You could tell, you know, Alex, I don't think gets enough credit for his work on this album, or even Mike Anthony. We'll hear the bass actually on the song, but everyone always gravitates to Eddie, obviously being one of the greatest guitar players of all time, and Dave, no matter what you think of him vocally, one of the best frontmen of all time. And this is them kind of at the height of their powers in 1978.
I think Dave sort of personifies the idea that, yeah, your frontman, all he really needs is charisma. You can figure out everything else later. Because yeah, you're right. I mean, I personally, how I feel about him as a vocalist is he's not the greatest vocalist. He's never been the greatest vocalist. He doesn't have to, because he needed to be what the band needed. And what the band needed was a charismatic madman. And I think, if nothing else, we can certainly call Diamond Dave a charismatic madman. But you're absolutely right. Michael, I think, overall, throughout the entirety of his time in the band, doesn't get enough credit whatsoever, let alone for his work on this album. But Michael, those high harmonies, man, like I am a sucker for high harmonies, and that's all Michael. And people just, you need to acknowledge it. And I feel like the more we continue with the show, the more we talk about other tracks where he's heavily featured, I will bring it up every time.
Well, this is a great example, because when you have a frontman who doesn't have a lot of range, has a lot of charisma, but doesn't have a lot of range, those high harmonies really mask a lot of issues. And this is one of the reasons I was so excited to do the show with you, Mark, because you're a singer and you're a musician. And so you can approach these songs from kind of that aspect. I'm not a musician. I want to be so bad, but I just don't have talent. If I just had a little talent, it would be okay, but I don't. But you know, I'm a sucker for rock history and that kind of thing. So I can maybe give some background. You know, when we talk about the lyrics, I'm really a fan of David Lee Roth lyrics. So I'm really looking forward to kind of breaking down his lyrics. That's one thing I think he has over Sammy Hagar. Not that Sammy Hagar is a bad lyricist, but Dave's got some classics.
That's an interesting statement. I'd love to unpack that.
You know, when we do Up for Breakfast, there's one that lyrically it's god awful, but I don't mind the music in that song.
Well, when we get to a particular Van Halen song that might be their biggest hit ever, and we'll talk about the lyrics of that one.
I think I know which one you're talking about. I'm looking forward to that one. But so what we're going to do, folks, is we're actually going to play the song, and Mark and I are going to break in every once in a while. We'll talk about maybe lyrically what Dave just sang, or with Sammy, whoever we're talking about, and we talk about the solos, obviously, and production, the actual production of the record and how it sounds and all that. And at the end, we're going to give you a yay or a nay, and we should maybe explain the yays and the nays here. For the yays, actually, I just took a little clip of Eddie Van Halen just nailing a little version of Eruption with some Diamond Dave-isms. I'm just going to give you the little, this is what you'll hear if we like the song. All right, so that's, if we like it, you're going to hear Eddie wailing away on the guitar and Dave loving every minute of it. If we did like the song, you're going to hear Eddie, who is maybe a little inebriated, trying to play some guitar with a bunch of Dave screaming no, and it'll sound like this.
Oh, God! No! God damn it, baby! No, I ain't lying to you!
Hey, man, don't be squirting water at me!
So yeah, if we don't like the song, we're going to hear Dave yelling, "Don't be squirting no water at me," which you just as a general rule of thumb, you shouldn't do. But in that particular
I would love
instance,
to know the context behind that clip. I'm
and
assuming just a crazy fan.
All you have to do is Google David Lee Roth on YouTube, and you're going to get all sorts of hits of him inebriated in the 80s, yelling at fans, different things. There's even one from the 2012 tour where he's yelling about the fans on the stage blowing too hard. That's really good. I'll try and get some clip outs from that one too for later shows.
Oh, I can't wait for that.
What do you say, Mark? Are we ready to start breaking down Running with the Devil?
I mean, I'm ready to run with the devil.
Hey, I like what you did there. All right.
Yeah.
All right, so right off the hop, we should just talk about these car horns. They're actually taken from the band's own cars, apparently, and Ted Templeman, who produced the album, slowed them down before adding them to the track. But they have the same idea on the Gene Simmons recorded demo. So that's been with this song from the beginning. But I'm trying to picture, if I was back in 1978 and I put this on my record player and I put the needle down, and that's the first thing I heard, how would I respond to that? Like now I've heard the song so many times, I'm used to it, but that first time, what do you think that initial gut reaction was?
I mean, for me personally, I was creeped out because it's such a, like I said earlier, it's a haunting sound, and it was not a friendly haunt, at least at the time it wasn't. But then as soon as the horns go away and the music gets started, it's like, oh, okay, cool. No, we're in for a wild ride here. But I always assumed they had some big elaborate machine that made this happen, and I would find out later, yeah, no, just the car horns and slowed down, and it pissed me off a little bit because I said, well, that sounds too easy.
And it was easy, but effective. Okay, so
exactly.
So let's see where the song goes from there. All right, so right off the hop, you got that classic Eddie. I love that, the bass first, right? That dun, dun, dun. Then Alex comes in with the count.
Just Michael hitting just the staccato, is open E's. Just those open E's just give you a little intro. And sometimes less is more. And this is like quintessential less. But it works. It absolutely works because it's just a buildup, and that's all you need it to be.
Yeah, and that's why as the opener of the album, I thought this was really genius because, you have that staccato bass and then the count in with the cymbal, and then all of a sudden there's Eddie, and you're getting into it. It's like, all right, I'm into this now. And then, of course, Mr. Roth comes in here right away. Sorry, did you want to break in there?
he right away is going to hit you with just a taste of the things that he's going to give you, not just this album, but his entirety in Van Halen. He's going to hit you with those high squeals that are going to come out of nowhere for usually no reason. But that is what established him as the voice of this band and gave an identity to this band. Not to mention Eddie's guitar tone, which has been often imitated, never fully duplicated.
Do you know what he used for gear on this album? I know obviously he had his the Frankensteiner is kind of his main guitar. What else, do you know of anything else that he played on this?
Well, he played on it was a PV guitar, and as far as his amp and his distortion goes, I'm not 100% sure. Probably should have looked that one up, and we'll get to it. We'll get around to it again eventually. But he just, I don't know. He was just I think he just sort of tinkered around until he found exactly what he needed, which is what a lot of these guys used to do. These days, you can just buy a pedal or an amp that has your built-in effects, your built-in distortions, and you can get exactly what sound you need for it just by saying, "Hey, can you make me sound like Eddie?" Yeah, sure. Here you go. Like, it kind of sounds like him. Mm-hmm. Whereas back in the day, he kind of just had to find it. You'd find it and stand out. So probably through a lot of trial and error.
I gotcha.
Life like this, no tomorrow. All I've got, I had to steal. We start on me to beg or borrow. Yes, I'm living at a pace that kills.
So, what, and I guess how they wrote their songs is, Eddie usually, and Alex, I guess, usually came up with melody and everything. They actually wrote the tune, and then they would hand it off to Dave, and he would rush off and, in 30 minutes write all the lyrics down. I guess he has these huge bursts of creativity that he would write. And this is why I'm really impressed with him as a lyricist, because here we have, I live my life like there's no tomorrow, and all I've got I had to steal. At least I don't need to beg or borrow. Yes, I'm living at a pace that kills. Like, that's a great verse.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course,
go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, and then from there we go into the iconic chorus, which a lot of people at the time, I think, is so associated with Satan worship, which the song has nothing to do with Satan worship. But
no, not at all. Yeah.
Yeah, but much like, shout at the devil and Highway to Hell, people hear that satanic inclination, right? And they think, oh, it's a song about Satan worship. Well, Highway to Hell is a song about touring. It has nothing to do with the devil at all.
Yeah, back in the day, metaphors seemed to be lost on people. That's the consensus I'm getting through all of this, and then through the Satanic Panic of era.
Very well said. Metaphors were lost.
You guys just really aren't getting this, are you?
All right, let's hear that chorus. Now, I saw you smiling there. Is it every time he does those high pitched ahas?
Well, no, because I did warn you, the audience, that that's what you were in for, and he warned you at the top of the song when all the guys you came in. You knew what you were in for. I'm smiling and I'm laughing because this is essentially not a chorus at all. We are singing the title of the song twice. That's what we're doing. That's our chorus, and then Dave's giving the ornamentation of his ooh yes and ahs, and that's your chorus. Again, less is more, but sometimes less can be just nothing at all. Sometimes the idea, you don't have an idea for a particular line, but all you got to do is say, okay, well, what do I have to work with? The song's called Running with the Devil. Cool. Let's throw that in there. Let's just make sure we sing the line, and that will be our chorus. We'll figure out everything else. It almost sounds like they didn't have an idea for a chorus. They just knew that this was the title of the song. We have to sing it at some point. We've got this line, Michael's still doing his open E staccatos. And then, Eddie's got the one riff, And they said, okay, just sing "Running with the Devil." All right, cool. That's it.
But you know,
That's all you need.
when you got David Lee Roth, and you got,
Oh, yes. No love you'd call real.
right, you don't need a lot, right? You just got David Lee Roth.
Oh, yeah.
Just throwing that color in there, right? And it works.
I mean, that's this is where a lot of musicians, even after this, probably beforehand too, but they if they had an idea, they would rely sometimes on the front man to carry it out and make it better. And I think that's what Dave's trying to do here. It does work. Don't get me wrong. It works for the song, but it's almost like they did not have a clue as to what the chorus was going to be. So they said, okay, well, we'll just play the riff, we'll sing the line, and Dave, you figure something else out to make it more, you make it stand out a little more. Sure.
And Dave's like, no problem.
I found the simple life ain't so simple. When I jumped out on that road, I got no love you'd call real. Ain't got nobody waiting at home.
Now, we were talking about lyrics earlier, Mark. What did you think of that verse there?
I personally think the second verse is stronger than the first verse, because I mean he's giving you want your first verse to be an introduction as to what your song is going to be about. So he gives you that, with this whole like it's just me single. I live my life at my own pace. It's a fast pace. It'll probably kill me. And then he's doubling down in the second verse. Is like, look, it's. Life sucks. Life's hard, and I gotta do what I gotta do to survive. There's nobody else. It's just me. It's the team of I. So why else would why wouldn't I go the pace that I'm going is essentially what I think he's saying.
So equate that then with the title of the song, because he's talking about, a life on that road. I'm assuming he's kind of equating it to being the life of a musician. Obviously paying your dues. In the 1970s in California, it couldn't have been easy playing school dances or CD bars or wherever just to make $20. So equate that, like, is that what he's associated with running with the devil? You're kind of chasing this demon known as rock and roll.
I mean, that's certainly a one perspective. That's the beauty of music and the beauty of songs like this that people still don't quite understand, is that it's subjective and it can mean so many different things. I'm sure Dave probably had something else in mind entirely when writing this. Maybe he had no thought at all. He just thought, hey, these words work together. This sounds about right. I can sing this. It works. And maybe he just by pure accident made some sense out of it. I'll give him a little more credit and go like, no, he's making a statement here. It's like, it's fine. But I'm just saying, you never know. This could mean exactly what you are interpreting it as, or it could mean something more. Like maybe I would say, at least the first time I heard it, I thought he was referring to like a traumatic childhood, or just dealing with the hardships of being a young person out in the world with nobody to rely on. But I think, I like your interpretation a lot better, because yes, as you mentioned, yeah, it is hard out there. It is tough being a musician, and when you're trying to make your dream happen, and when you're trying to achieve your goals, it's hard because the world will eat you up and spit you out.
And I love that line. I found the simple life ain't so simple. Like you could equate that to a lot of things. I thought you were kind of onto something where you said maybe he just found a theme that just kind of sounded good. Because remember, this is their first album and one of the first songs that he wrote, right? He's writing lyrics for. So maybe he is just throwing shit at the wall and seeing what sticks. That's a very real possibility. When you said that, I'm like, that makes a hell of a lot of sense, because
it happens way more often than you think, and with a lot of really popular songs.
Awesome. All right. Well, we're going to have one more of our favorite chorus here, and then the Eddie solo, which I'm really looking forward to. So let's get into that. right. So a short solo. We would expect a little more maybe from the guitar virtuoso that is Edward Van Halen. But man, that to me as a non-musician listening to it, I think that's a solo that serves the song. It's not about how many notes I can play or how fast I can play it. That's a solo that serves the song.
That's exactly what I was going to point out, because and let's pretend for a second we're just throwing this record on. We drop the needle. We have no expectations. We don't know that Eddie is this guitar virtuoso yet, and he's giving us this solo that is very, very quick. It's only a few bars, and it's subtle. It's funny to say that, like, yeah, an Eddie Van Halen solo was subtle, but this one's subtle because it is, as you say, it's serving the song. It's not he's not pardon the term, he's not jerking himself off. He's he's just playing to serve the song. He's not trying to out perform Dave or Michael or Alex. He's just putting a solo in because that's what you did in rock. He put a solo in, and it's not even remotely close to what we would hear from him just right after this track. It's subtle, and I find that so hilarious and actually kind of brilliant of him to do that.
Oh, I totally agree. And I think of a guy like Vernon Reid from Living Colour. You think about the solo. He actually had two solos in Cult of Personality, neither of which I think really serve the song. It's all about, look how great of a guitar player I am. And he's a brilliant guitar player, but they don't really work with the song. You could be a brilliant guitar player and play a solo that works with the song. I go back to a guy like Angus Young, who is never really considered among your top guitar players, but he composes solos that fit those songs like a glove. And they may be easier to play than the solos from like Cult of Personality, but they're better in that they actually work, I think, better with the song. And that's just an outsider's perspective. Looking at that, you may think completely differently.
I will only interject and say Vernon's solo served the purpose of, guess how many notes I can fit into this. You're wrong. You'll never guess. But I understand what you're saying. Yes.
Absolutely.
May I interject and say big shout out to, I think was that a kazoo or was that just like a gym whistle? Whatever that was, it always makes me laugh when I hear it, because I go like, well, that was a choice.
It's kicking around the studio, I guess, and Ted Templeman was like, yeah, let's throw that on there. I don't know.
Throw that in there.
And I never really noticed before. Like, is that a kazoo or is it a gym whistle? I want to lean more towards whistle.
I think it's too high to be a kazoo, but it's one of those things. Like you see clowns with it, which makes sense. Little slide things. Yeah, which makes sense. Dave is the rock and roll clown, so there you go.
I found the simple life once so simple. No, when I jumped out on that road, got no love you call real. Got nobody waiting at home. Running with the devil.
So here's where I want to shout out Michael Anthony, because
Yes,
he's such a great background vocalist. And when you have that great background vocalist, and Eddie's in there too, not as prominent as Michael Anthony, but it really kind of covers up when your lead singer has some deficiencies in his vocal range, doesn't it?
Oh, it absolutely does. And Michael is, what's great about him is he serves his purpose as background vocals very well in that he provides an extra layer. And it's so good that you don't really, if you're not paying attention to it, you won't realize what he's doing. But he's so precise. That's another thing. It's one thing to sing high. It's another thing to sing high and hit your notes precisely. This, kids, was before the invention of auto-tune, where the computer just does that for you. Like, no, back in the day, if you didn't hit your note right, you had to do it again and again. And you did it until you got that note right, or many notes right. I don't know how many takes it took Michael to do his background vocals. I'm going to just go ahead and guess not that many. because the guy was consistent. And as we go along in these episodes and these tracks, we'll hear it more. That's one of his brilliancies that really just kind of goes underrated, in my opinion, about him. But also with this line that we just heard, we get to hear a little bit more of Eddie giving us some little guitar flair. He does the little how do I explain it? Well, these little harmonic sounds that doo doo doo, as Dave is finishing his line in the verse, just to give it a little extra little ornamentation. He's not doing it to make any sort of statement. I don't think he's just saying, it's like, hey, look, we got some other stuff going on over here. Meanwhile, Dave comes in with the chorus with just the biggest howl, because he will not be upstaged, and he's going to let you know it in this opening track.
That's a really interesting point. This book I'm reading, which a fantastic book by Noel Monk. You should definitely pick it up. But they talk about Dave not wanting to be one upped, and I'm actually at the chapter where it was Eddie's wedding to Valerie Bertinelli, and how cranky Dave was because the spotlight wasn't on him. So I could see him hearing Eddie put a little thing in that song, right, a little harmonic to stand out, and Dave trying to one up him, because that was their whole relationship. He felt like he knew Eddie Van Halen was a genius, and he would always have to try and get ahead of that. But again, Michael Anthony, I know we're going to talk about a lot. Really the unsung hero of Van Halen in a lot of ways. Eddie gets a lot of props. Dave does, obviously. Sammy, when he gets in there. Alex is, I think, a top 100 drummer of all time in rock and roll. He doesn't get enough credit, but Michael Anthony does more for the sound of Van Halen, or does as much as the other three, I think.
Oh, absolutely. Because as you say, you have Diamond Dave doing his thing, and Dave's just gonna Dave. And then, Eddie's basically got to be kind of the second voice of the band, the more prominent voice in that guitar wise, because he's the one giving us the sonic remembrance. But Alex and Michael are the foundations. They are the ones really holding it together. And without them, the whole thing without them, it's just Eddie just playing guitar in his room by himself. And then Dave's just howling into the wind.
Yep, exactly. All right, I got 49 seconds left. Let's ride this out here. Oh man, they don't make them like that anymore.
No, they literally don't. But again, that Dave says one more time, giving Eddie the it's like, oh, okay, one more solo. But Eddie, he doesn't give you a different solo. He doesn't do a new variation. He slightly alters the same solo just to give it a little bit of a fresh edge, I guess, probably as a way of letting you know, hey, we're going into a different part of the song. We're not going back to the same thing. And, this is my outro, if you will, because we're about to give you the outro. But again, it serves the song, as you said. And it's just so funny looking at it with these, with the perspective of this now with an analytical point. It's really funny because that's just not it's not what we typically get from Eddie in the other songs that we will go over. But it's a really smart move, and yeah, that is our opening track, our introduction to the band, as it were.
Yep. And I really kind of liked going back. I didn't realize Dave threw in as much of those yes and stuff as he did, especially near the end of that song. It's constant. Like every 3 seconds, he's screaming something. And listening to it with kind of an analytical ear, you really point him out. It's like, do we really need 18 Oh Gods and Ah Yes and all that. A few, sure, but
that's his niche though. That became his thing, and it's like I think it all starts with this track. It would not surprise me if this is the first track they recorded together as a band. It would not surprise me.
Not me either. It was part of that 4-track demo that they recorded with Gene Simmons. So maybe it was Gene's idea, like Dave. You really got to throw something in there, or Eddie's going to overshadow you.
What if that's the new headcanon? It's all because of Gene Simmons. Gene Simmons said, "Hey Dave, if you add a little bit more of that like weird howling and squealing that you do, it could really stand out." It's like, okay, Gene, I'm on it.
The two biggest egos in rock and roll, right, have to be Gene Simmons and David Lee Roth. So that totally makes sense.
Name two bigger egos. Go ahead, I'll wait.
Yeah, I don't think you can. So if that came from Gene Simmons, it would not shock me in the least, because he's not a better vocalist than Paul Stanley. He's probably got to do stuff like that too to try and stay on level with Paul. Even in songwriting, like all Gene songs are about getting laid. Whereas Paul could actually compose a song about different things. So,
well, I mean, look no further than their live performances. I mean, Paul and Ace and even wow, I just blanked on his name, the drummer.
Peter Criss.
Thank you. Wow, that's embarrassing. But look at all of them with their makeup and their attire. And it's very sleek. It's very they're individuals, but they're not so incredibly flashy. And then you got Gene, the demon, who's spitting blood. He's throwing his giant tongue everywhere. He's wearing armor. He's got giant stacks. He's flying. Sometimes if the rafters will allow it, he's blowing out fire. Like he's being the showman, even when he's not singing a song. He's just barely playing bass, but he's got to be the showman. So yeah, it's all there.
And we have another relationship here. We have David Lee Roth and Eddie Van Halen, kind of fire and ice, and Michael Anthony and Alex are the lukewarm water. If there's a Spinal Tap reference for you folks, and it's because that dynamic broke up the band after their biggest album in 1984. So we'll have tons of time to get into that relationship and how different David Lee Roth is as a frontman from Sammy Hagar, who we're going to get some Sammy songs here. But first, we have to vote on this one, Mark. Maybe I'll start things off on the first show here. Is this an all-time rock and roll classic? Yeah, it is right. Running with the Devil. This is an all-time rock and roll classic. It's a Van Halen classic. It's a classic anyway, slice it. There's nothing I don't like about this song. It's rock and roll perfection. It definitely gets a big yeah from me. How about you, Mr. Kmeyer?
After all the stuff that we've just said, I hate to be the contrarian, so I'm not going to. It's absolutely... Like, how do you not give this a yeah?
You can't. You can't host a podcast like this and vote against Running with the Devil. And really, if anybody out there listening to this disagrees with us, get a hold of us on Twitter. We're at Podcast Will Rock on Twitter. Podcastwillrock@gmail.com. Also, we have an email address. Let us know if you think we're wrong, because I really doubt there's a person out there who's going to listen to this and say, yeah, that song stunk. Give me more Gary Cherone.
I mean, I get they may not say that last bit, but there definitely are people out there that most definitely think this Van Halen song in particular is not one of their best. I don't understand that, but yes, as Corey said, please hit us up and let us know your thoughts on that, because I'm dying to understand that perspective.
Yeah, I don't get it all. So maybe a little duller episode in that we both gushed all over the song, but there's going to be some songs in this catalog where we're going to be like, what the Sam bloody fuck was that? To me, the perfect album for that is For Unlawful Carnal Knowledge, because it has some of my favorite Sammy songs and some of the biggest pieces of shit that they've ever recorded, all on the same album.
can confirm that was the first Van Halen album I ever purchased.
Oh, really?
Without knowing what the tracks were. I just knew it was Van Halen. That was the album, so I bought it. And I was pleasantly surprised by some, and some I was going, I don't think this is the same band I was thinking about. Like, what's happening? This is a compilation disc, right? This is a different band. What's happening?
Yeah, and there's quite a few of those in the catalog. So we're going to get some clunkers, but the first one, at least in our estimation, was not a clunker. Again, if you disagree, let us know. Give us your opinion. I'd like to try and understand that opinion because I just don't see it. I love this song.
Yeah, and if you have if you agreed with us though, and you still have a different take than what we did, maybe as I mentioned about the lyrics to Corey and how his perspective was this, but maybe Dave's was actually this, or what? Let us know your perspective. What do you think running with the devil means to you from your perspective? Let us know it all. And that'll do it for episode 1 of And the Podcast Will Rock. Yes, that's a play on Van Halen because this is a Van Halen podcast. I am super excited. We got the first episode down with the opening track. You knew this was going to be a gush fest, and that's exactly what we gave you. Going forward, though, we're going to utilize the giant wheel, the track wheel, and we will spin it. We will get a track and we will talk about whatever it lands on. Or if it lands on a song that we've already talked about, then it's like free spin.
I'll just remove it from the wheel as we go. So,
oh, well, there you go. Never mind. No free spin. We will just keep on rocking. So I anticipate this is going to get very, very, it's going to be fun regardless, but I anticipate it's going to get very interesting the further on we go. But I'm excited to do this new venture. I'm excited to have you all join us and just geek out, even if it's in a somewhat negative vibe, but mostly positive vibe. Geek out on one of the greatest rock bands of all time, Van Halen. This was a fantastic idea. Corey Morissette, any final parting words, and where can the people find you?
You can find me on Twitter at CD Morissette. I think I'm on the Insta Face or whatever that picture one. I'm on there too somewhere. And right now, just doing this here show and looking forward to 119 more of these at least. Like I said, I wouldn't mind getting into maybe a couple of Diamond Dave solo cuts, a couple of Sammy cuts, maybe some Wolfgang as we go along. Because if the rest of the shows are going to be like this one, it's going to be a ton of fun, and the time is just going to fly right by. We endeavor to do this every single week, folks. Look for us to drop on Fridays. Wherever you get your favorite podcast from, we'll have a new episode for you, and completely at random. So I'm looking forward to seeing which albums will be represented early on, which ones we'll have to kind of wait for. I know listening to Pot of Thunder, they were really hoping for some Destroyer tracks right off the hop, and it took them 90 episodes, I think, before they finally got one. So we'll see how long it takes us to get a pound cake or something from For Unlawful, which was Mark's first Van Halen album.
Yeah, I'm just right now would be a fun one to do, like, immediately. But honestly, now I'm curious as to know how far we were going to go before we get the rest of the tracks from Van Halen 1. Time will tell, but I'm excited to figure that out. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Mark the Bat. I'm doing this show, and then look for all my music stuff that I've got coming on the pipeline. There's some interesting things happening currently, and be on the lookout for all of that. It's a great time. And hey, just in case you guys get sick of just the two of us rambling by our lonesome, fret not, because we are planning to have guests. We will have new perspectives, so it's not just the two of us gushing or absolutely shitting all over, depending on the track that day. We will have more perspectives, so be aware of that and look forward to it. I certainly am. On behalf of Corey and myself, this has been And the Podcast Will Rock, and we will rock you later.